Good morning. I'm Brett Perlman, CEO of the Center for Houston's Future, and I'd like to welcome you to the third and final day of our conference, The Future of Global Energy, Houston's Role in Leading the Energy Transition, presented by Chevron. I'd like to thank Chevron, Accenture, and Deloitte, and the rest of our conference sponsors, as well as the Greater Houston Partnership. Just to recap our conference, on day one of the conference, the Greater Houston Partnership revealed a detailed strategy for our region to lead the world's energy transition. And yesterday, Dr. Julio Friedman highlighted opportunities for Houston on carbon capture. Today, we'll focus on another area in the strategy. That's developing a world-leading low-carbon hydrogen hub. This will drive decarbonization locally and bring new products and services to the nation and possibly the world. It will create a new low-carbon energy industry here in Houston and lead to many new jobs. So it's an exciting opportunity for Houston. But first, let me tell you a little bit about the center. We are a 20-year-old independent nonprofit, which is affiliated with the Greater Houston Partnership. We focus on understanding future global trends and their impacts on the Houston region. And then we work with community, business, and government leaders to develop and catalyze actions that solve problems and take advantage of opportunities. In short, we aim to look over the horizon to build Houston's future as a great global city. And given the imperative towards addressing climate change and Houston's leading position as the world's energy capital, the center has been a pioneer in recognizing that Houston could become a low-carbon energy capital and has been undertaking research, conferences, webcasts, projects, and other activities to create this vision. As a result of this work, the center has identified multiple opportunities for expanding clean hydrogen value chains in Texas and has developed a vision and roadmap to create new markets for low-carbon hydrogen. The Houston region today is a leading hydrogen producer for oil and gas refining and petrochemical feedstocks. But there are significant opportunities to build on this asset base, on the expertise of Houston-based energy companies, on the region's trained and skilled workforce, and our depth in energy engineering and professional services. Given the region's unique assets, our vision is for Houston to play a positive role in lowering carbon emissions from existing hydrogen production, to pioneer new ways of producing hydrogen, and to expand into new applications and uses for hydrogen. But we also recognize the urgency of this issue, both from a climate change and competitive standpoint. Carbon emissions are at their all-time peak, and over the last several years, we are seeing unusual storms, heat waves, freezes, and hurricanes. Also, multiple regions across the globe are now racing to develop strategies to use hydrogen in achieving their decarbonization goals, including Japan, Australia, and many European countries. And preeminent energy companies have made significant climate commitments and have announced plans for hydrogen projects to help meet those commitments. All of this explains why the Hydrogen Council estimates that this market will grow 5 times over the next decade. So this is a powerful watershed moment for Houston, and it's one we're going to explore today. To start the conference, I'd like to invite Daniel Droog, Vice President, Energy Transition for Chevron, to provide keynote remarks. Daniel?
I'm excited to join you today, and I want to thank the Greater Houston Partnership and the Center for Houston's Future for organizing this important event. These organizations play a leading role in driving Houston's strong, diverse economy and making Houston a great place to live and do business, and ensuring Houston remains an engine of energy innovation and growth. At Chevron, we're proud of our relationship with Houston. That relationship is personal to me and one I'm committed to. This month, I joined the board of the Center for Houston's Future. I'm grateful for this opportunity. I like to say I moved to Houston for 1 year, 20 years ago. After graduate school, my wife and I packed everything we owned into our car and moved to Houston what was supposed to be for 1 year. That was in 2002. Nearly 20 years later, we remain anchored in this incredible city, which has given us so much. Neighborhoods where we've raised our family, communities of good friends, and a challenging career in a dynamic industry. The common thread across our 20-year experience And the reason we remain in Houston today is simple. It's people. For decades, people have made Houston the epicenter of the energy industry. And as the world transitions to a lower carbon future, it is again looking to the people of Houston for leadership. This challenge will be met in three important ways that I'll talk about today: Houston's advantages, Chevron's plans to lead, and our shared future. Houston is the capital of the global energy industry and a destination for the world's energy talent, a leading employer of energy workers, and a hub for innovations that have revolutionized our sector. For over a century, Houston has been the place where the boundaries of science and technology have been pushed harder, further, and higher, all towards a goal of delivering the energy that drives human progress around the world. More than 100 years ago, energy brought about what Harvard's Steven Pinker called the world's great escape from poverty and disease, from hunger and illiteracy. This remains an essential fact. Still today, around the world, over 3 billion people lack access to clean energy to cook. Over 1 billion do not have electricity, and 4.5 billion do not have access to clean water or sanitation. And amid these challenges, society's expectations are rising. Its aspirations are shifting. The climate and carbon challenge are critical. Our industry must continue to meet the world's vast global energy needs while doing so with less carbon. Houston has played a leadership role in energy transitions for over a century. It is ideally positioned to lead the transition to a lower carbon future. A recent study by Rice University's Baker Institute for Public Policy highlights Houston's comparative advantages. Houston's workforce includes 57,000 engineers, one of the largest concentrations of engineering talent in America. It is the most diverse city in the country, the greatest majority-minority community in America, making it a highly dynamic environment that feeds innovation. Houston is ideally positioned to develop the first truly integrated power market, given Houston's leadership and installed renewable capacity to go along with its dominance in oil and natural gas, as well as its position to grow new energies. Houston also has the expertise to develop, promote, and scale technologies that can decarbonize the energy supply chain and achieve our environmental goals. Advances in areas like hydrogen, carbon capture and storage, reducing methane emissions, and exporting LNG as a replacement for coal in power generation. As noted in the work of the Greater Houston Partnership and the Center for Houston's Future, it takes real expertise to fundamentally shift the world's energy structure. It will take entrepreneurial creation and scientific insights that generate new innovations, lower carbon technologies that can be scaled on a global level, a robust, reliable energy infrastructure capable of integrating new sources and exporting them, and a market and political environment that promotes cleaner energy solutions. These are the result of human ingenuity, and this is where Houston has an edge over many cities in the world. It's imperative for Houston to direct this advantage towards solving the great challenges ahead. We at Chevron plan to lead. We express our energy transition strategy in a few simple words: higher returns, lower carbon. Our lower carbon actions are focused in three areas: lowering carbon intensity cost efficiently, increasing renewables and offsets, and investing in low carbon technologies. Many of our recent low carbon actions have been led out of Houston. Let's talk about each. First, we're actively lowering the carbon intensity of our operations because this is one of the most essential and effective contributions we can make. We have already exceeded our 2023 greenhouse gas reduction goals. And we recently announced new 2028 goals that align with the Paris Agreement. We have a $2 billion capital program to achieve those goals, and this effort is led by our talented team here in Houston. We've already reduced absolute U.S. onshore methane emissions by 85% since 2013, and we're committed to achieving zero routine flaring across our operations by 2030. We have a leading portfolio advantaged in the lowest quartile of carbon intensity, and we're still improving. Second, we're increasing renewables and offsets in support of our business. By 2025, we expect to increase our renewable natural gas production tenfold, and we expect more than half our retail locations will be selling renewable or biodiesel. In sustainable base oil products, last year, our joint venture with Novi reached first production of a 100% renewable base oil at its Houston area facility. In renewable power, our 500 megawatt program is led by our Houston-based power division, which is focusing on projects in the Permian Basin as well as internationally. In offsets, our Houston-based supply and trading team is engaging customers around the world to develop cost-effective options to pair with our product offerings. And third, we're investing in low carbon technologies. This past year, our Houston-based business development team launched a new carbon capture project with Microsoft, Schlumberger, and Clean Energy Solutions. The project is designed to utilize agricultural waste from California to produce renewable power while capturing and storing the CO2. Following my remarks, this conference will turn its attention to hydrogen. We're also working right here in Houston to scale a hydrogen business that can deliver the lower carbon products our customers are seeking. We believe hydrogen can play a key role in decarbonizing sectors that renewables have difficulty serving. Sectors like heavy-duty transportation, hard to abate and heat or energy intense manufacturing, and also for stable power and grid resiliency. We recently formed a strategic alliance with Toyota to accelerate innovations in hydrogen. Our Houston-based team is on track to offer consumers hydrogen fueling at locations in 2022. At Chevron, we see Houston as a critical partner and an ideal platform from which to lead. So let's spend a few minutes talking about our shared future. To reach the global net zero ambitions outlined in the Paris Agreement, we've created a strategy that extends beyond pledges and predictions to focus on projects and people. Our belief is energy is about people, those who use it and those who create the projects that produce it. As noted in the report by the Greater Houston Partnership and the Center for Houston's Future, reaching global net zero will require new innovations that have yet to be brought to market, advancements in technology that have yet to be developed, and supportive public policies that have yet to be enacted. This is an imperative for Houston and Chevron. That's why Chevron is fully invested in Houston's future as a low-carbon energy hub. We were the first tenant in the ION, Houston's new center for accelerating innovation and securing the city's role as a nexus in the energy transition. We have anchored Chevron's $300 million Future Energy Fund II in Houston. Along with prior commitments, we're investing $500 million in emerging technologies, testing their effectiveness, and scaling the best solutions that can have a real impact in a lower carbon future. We were the first founding partner of Greentown Labs Houston, which will nurture climate tech startups and serve as a center for collaboration and partnership. We have partnered with Rice University on our Digital Scholar Program, where employees attend Rice full-time for 1 year, focused on skill and experience development to accelerate innovation back into the company. These investments demonstrate our optimism about the future of energy and the leadership role Houston and Chevron will play in achieving it. As I conclude, I want to reflect on our past. If we look to history, there was nothing foreordained about Houston's emergence as the world's energy capital. Major oil was struck elsewhere. There were larger populations, greater manufacturing, better developed infrastructure, and more capital in many other cities. What Houston did have were visionaries, people who recognized the region's potential and the world's needs for energy. Risk takers who invested in the city to draw energy enterprise to the area. Innovators who saw no reason why they could not break new barriers. And deal makers who brought our products to the world. And leaders who voted to spend what was then an enormous sum of $1.25 million to eventually turn what had been a backwater bayou 50 miles inland into one of the busiest seaports in the world. What did Houston recognize that we must remember today? Solving the great challenges of energy depends on people. It depends on us. This is why Houston became the world's energy leader, why it continues to be the world's energy leader, and why Houston will lead the world's energy transition. Thank you.
Thanks, Daniel, for that important perspective. Next up, I'd like to welcome our second morning keynote speaker, Andreas Wagner. Andreas leads hydrogen activities at the Energy Transitions Commission, a global coalition of leaders from across the energy landscape committed to achieving net zero emissions by mid-century. He's the co-author of the recent commission report, Making the Hydrogen Economy Possible, Accelerating Clean Hydrogen in an Electrified Economy. Andreas is going to help us understand the global market for hydrogen and where Houston fits in that context. Welcome, Andreas.
Whether that's from traditional fossil fuel industries as well as renewables, as well as the industry sector, heavy industry sector, finance, and civil society. Within civil society, we are actually also having members from the UK, from the US, for example, Rocky Mountain Institute. And within that sort of broader framework, we work together with our knowledge partners at Bloomberg New Energy Finance and the entire coalition around describing and performing analysis on how to get to net zero by mid-century. What I would like to talk to you today is around the topic of hydrogen, of course. Hydrogen is what we call the second decarbonization vector, following clean electrification. The major role of electrons and renewables is in electrification of our society and our economy and our business to get to net zero by mid-century, and will require to grow that by 3.5 to 5 times compared to today. But hydrogen is the second decarbonization vector. And its derived fuels will grow by around 5 to 7 times today, and actually contribute significantly to growing the hydrogen economy. The other decarbonization vectors that we are talking about are bioenergy and fossil plus CCU and CCS. And those 4 decarbonization vectors together will ultimately help us to get to net zero. Diving into clean hydrogen. Clean hydrogen, I think, will play a growing role across the entire economy as the world transitions to net zero. So today we're using around 100 million tons of hydrogen, fossil-derived hydrogen, in our system, in our industries today, but we'll have to get to approximately 500 to 800 million tons by 2050, and it will grow from traditional chemical industries to many other sectors as well that are listed here. For example, the shipping sector via the use of clean ammonia derived from clean hydrogen, or the use in steel to replace coking coal. So overall, there's going to be a growing hydrogen ecosphere to mid-century. And we distinguish 4 different types of demand categories when we talk about clean hydrogen demand going forward to mid-century. First of all, the existing use cases of hydrogen within the fertilizer, methanol, and refining sector shown here in green, where we think we can transition relatively easily to use clean hydrogen instead of fossil-derived hydrogen that is used today and emitting significant amounts of CO2. Secondly, in blue, you see what we call the highly likely and large long-term demand use cases. So the role of clean hydrogen in aviation, in shipping, and in steel that I've mentioned before, but also the role of hydrogen in balancing the power system. For aviation and shipping, just to be clear, hydrogen would be used as clean ammonia or clean synfuel derived from hydrogen. Thirdly, in yellow, what we see is a number of sectors where we see a potential role for clean hydrogen to play a role to get to net zero. However, it will depend on cost and technology developments of hydrogen, but also of the other decarbonization vectors that will decide upon hydrogen's role and the size of hydrogen's contribution on decarbonization there. For example, in the heavy-duty trucking sector, will depend on the cost developments of hydrogen, but also on the technology and cost developments of batteries, for example. Lastly, there's a short-term transitional use cases such as co-firing of hydrogen that by definition are transitional because in a net zero world, we're going to have to fully convert towards hydrogen. Today, clean hydrogen, as I've said, is a carbon-intensive production method and is emitting significant amounts of CO2. But it is the cheapest way of hydrogen. It's generally referred to as gray hydrogen. Blue hydrogen, on the other hand, is pretty much the same methodology of producing the hydrogen, but then using carbon capture and storage. So using the carbon dioxide, storing it permanently underground, removing it from the atmosphere and removing the emissions through that. And green hydrogen is using zero carbon electricity and electrolysis to split water into hydrogen and oxygen. However, clean hydrogen, as you see on this chart, is at this point in time more expensive than fossil-derived hydrogen without any form of carbon pricing, for example. So how much and what does it take to get the costs down of the clean hydrogen production methods? So we think that in the long term, green hydrogen will actually dominate in terms of the cost perspective. And in the near term, we will require an approximately 50 gigawatt of electrolyzer capacity to unlock production prices below $2 per kilogram, which will make it competitive versus blue hydrogen average locations, but also competitive in expensive gray hydrogen regions. So in particular, in favorable locations for green hydrogen production, it will become very favorable within just a few years. And what's also illustrated here on this slide is that the target of, for example, the EU to get 40 gigawatts of electrolyzers by 2030, combined with the target of Chile to get 25 gigawatts online by 2030, is significantly beyond those 50 gigawatts and enough to actually unlock these cost demands. And currently, there's a project pipeline of over 200 gigawatts of electrolyzers already happening now, getting down those costs. And in terms of the path to get to 2050, what does that mean in terms of the role of green and blue hydrogen and how much of it do we respectively likely see? In terms of our illustrative scenarios, we looked at 3 different scenarios and we think that green hydrogen will take the major share by 2050, over 75% likely green hydrogen, based on the fact there will be lower costs beyond 2030 in almost all locations. However, in the 2020s, which is what you see at the bottom of the chart, blue hydrogen, so again, hydrogen derived together with carbon capture and storage, will take a major share of the ramp up of our clean hydrogen production and use. Now, what does this significant ramp up of hydrogen production entail? So for green hydrogen production, I've mentioned you need a lot of electricity. So what you're seeing here is the ramp up of electricity use overall in our economy to get to net zero. And the yellow wedge here is describing the amount of electricity required to make green hydrogen and green hydrogen derived fuels. So we're going to see a significant power ramp up For more details on this, please refer to our the sister report of the hydrogen report that I'm talking about today from the Energy Transitions Commission on clean electrification. That's going to describe all of this in a lot greater detail, but we do not see inherent barriers of scaling the clean power system. But there is planning and incentivizing required to actually design an optimal power market and streamline permitting processes, as well as actually creating the skills for the labor market to be able to fulfill some of the jobs that will be created through this. But it will also mean a significant opportunity in terms of cumulative investments to create this hydrogen ecosystem or economy. We believe on the order of 15 trillion globally by mid-century will be needed and for ramping up clean hydrogen towards mid-century, peaking at around 800 billion per year. And what you see is that the major cost driver for this is the provision of clean power. So producing all the renewables that will be required for the electricity to make the green hydrogen. Now, so far I've been talking about the global picture. Let's have a quick look at Houston. I know that the previous presentation and also yesterday, Dr. Friedman have touched upon this, but Houston has an enormous potential to play an important role in this. For example, I've borrowed two charts here from a fantastic report by Princeton University on net zero America and how, in particular for the US, the system has to develop. And you see that Texas in their models shows by far the biggest renewables investments for solar and wind generation of all the states of the US, given its fantastic solar and wind resources within the state, and investments of multiple billion dollars. Not only power though, also for carbon capture and storage, the Gulf Coast is one of the best suited places in the globe to actually enable blue hydrogen production cost efficiently. So beyond power and CCS, Houston also has, as already been mentioned, a fantastic already existing hydrogen infrastructure, some of the longest hydrogen pipelines in the world, and 3 out of 6 of the hydrogen salt caverns to store hydrogen also exist here around Houston. So there's everything in place to really kickstart the development of a clean hydrogen hub here in Houston. And when we talk about the development of early demand, we really look at the development of clusters. And we've looked at 4 archetypes within our report: ports, cities, refining and fertilizer, as well as steel, being those 4 archetypes. And you'll notice that for all of these 4 archetypes, the respective demand is present here in Houston. It's got a huge port, it's got a huge city, it's got a huge refining and fertilizer industry, as well as the steel industry. But what you also note here is that a lot is already happening throughout the globe. And this is only an extract of many more projects that are happening already. This is already going on in many other locations, particularly in Europe, but also beyond, in terms of getting this sort of jumping on this opportunity of clean hydrogen. Now, why haven't we seen it earlier and why haven't we seen it yet and more of it? The reason for that is that the clean hydrogen production is still more costly, but also the derived products from it are more costly than its fossil competitors. So many hydrogen technologies, in terms of the intermediate cost of a product that they derive, are more expensive than derived from fossil. Let me take the example of shipping here that you see in the second row. The usage of clean ammonia compared to fuel oil that is traditionally used for shipping at $2 per kilogram hydrogen price will add approximately 160% additional cost. However, if you trickle through this cost increase to the end product, it's absolutely not significant. It's below 1% ultimately. So what we'll have to learn and figure out is how we can trickle through this cost premium across the value chain and dilute down the costs evenly to enable clean hydrogen. And policy will play an absolutely critical role for this. And what we've done in our report is map different key instruments to overcome the premium, then the cost premium that I've just described, to to enable clean hydrogen to play this significant role in terms of the decarbonization for economy. Carbon pricing plays a fundamental role as a leveling the playing field across fossil fuels and clean technologies. But also there's a strong role for mandates and public procurement, voluntary green premium markets, public procurement, and contracts for difference. And for each of these sectors, one or the other methodology or instrument will be most impactful. For example, for steel, the formation of a voluntary green premium is already going on. Volvo, Mercedes-Benz, and others are already now committing to use green steel for their car production by 2025 onwards. And they are going to create an entire new market for green steel demand that's building up right now. But similarly, there's going to be a role for mandates, there's going to be a role for carbon contracts for difference, depending on each of those sectors. Now, we're going to see the early demand of clean hydrogen in multiple sectors staggered across according to how ready they are. And we think by 2030, overall, we're going to see 50 million tons as a clean hydrogen production target. We should have 50 million tons, of which around 2/3 are going to stem from existing hydrogen use cases that are already ready to use the clean hydrogen. But simultaneously, we need to get other use cases such as steel, such as shipping, off the ground now, get them ready for them to play their crucial role of full decarbonization until mid-century. Let me finish by just showing you some of the critical actions that are needed to actually enable the hydrogen economy and the hydrogen ecosystem across supply, transportation, and storage and demand. I'm not going to go through here in detail. I just want to re-emphasize the importance of the role of enabling the early demand for clean hydrogen through carbon pricing, through sector-specific policies and actions to create an early demand, also for sector-specific financial support mechanisms to overcome the cost premium. And lastly, to establish clean hydrogen and the products derived from it, a certification scheme for those to enable them to play that critical role. Let me finish by referring you to the 2 reports that we've published at the Energy Transitions Commission approximately 2 months ago. And thank you very much for your attention and giving me the opportunity to present here today.